Is that a new intro song
All
though?
right.
I think
That's the
so.
Rocky
Okay,
song.
that's
Don't
fine.
copyright that.
It was. I was keeping it close to Rocky, but far enough away.
Nice.
All right. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Clusterbuck podcast. We have Hunter Ziegler. He's the one in high definition, filming on his DLSR.
What?
We got Nico Galdoni. He's got the duck decoys in the back. This is an audio podcast. You probably can't see anyway. And then I am here in my office in my house. Today we're going to talk about our 2024 Colorado elk hunt. We just got back. Well, it's almost been a week now.
Yeah, I think I'm
But we just
still
got back from
recovering.
Colorado.
I'm wore out still.
So it was our third year on that side of the canyon, our fourth year total in that unit. So, and spoiler alert, we came back empty-handed this year. So we've been successful the past 2 years. This year we had a little bit of bad luck. We did have some opportunities at bulls. Uh, weather could, I mean, I would call it bad weather, probably just from the first day. I don't think anything could have happened after the first day that would have made me say that we had good weather for the trip. I think the first day really, uh, that was not good coming in the first day. So we'll talk about that and everything else. So, logistics. So the trip, we've been planning this trip. I think it's a lot easier now to plan now that we've done it a few times in a row. But the logistics every year is something that the three of us, four of us, depending on how many guys go, come together and kind of have to figure out. We always go the last week of September. So I think we could talk about this a little bit, but I think we have found that the last week of September, after the muzzleloader season comes through, seems to be most years right when the rut is really at peak and heating up. I think this year we maybe hit it just a touch late. It seemed like the bulls were going silent there towards the end of our trip. That could have been weather related, that could have been pressure related. But I think in the past, even with pressure, we heard a lot more bugles last year and definitely the year prior than we heard this year. We didn't really get into any of those big rut fests like we have before.
Yeah,
First few days, the bulls were bugling, but not like we're used to.
I would jump in on that and say that I think the first trip that we went on kind of got us away from anything but the last week. I mean, I guess you could. We never really have went the first week, so that's still something that we might try out. But that first year we went during muzzleloader with a bow, and the area we went to is heavily pressured, like Jordan just said. And predominantly, I think the moon really got us that week. We had a full moon, and I don't know if that always times up in that third week or muzzleloader season, but it seems so. The last 3 years or so, I've paid more and more attention because of that first year. I felt like we got burned a little bit. It felt like the bulls
Mhm.
were bugling only at night, and I remember we didn't. I don't know if we laid eyes on a single elk in the daylight. Like I think 3 or 4 hunters in our camp might have seen
We
a few.
did we
But
did the first day. Me and you were coming with that power line, but it was just breaking daylight, and it was kind of a fleeting moment. Because I remember that first trip we did. First trip we did, just for context, was not a backpacking trip. We hunted from not from the road, but we were camped on the road, which I think is what a majority of hunters in that unit were doing. And we did see a cow elk like the first 5 minutes of our hunt coming up a power line. That being our first trip to Colorado, I know I thought that we were going to be in them the rest of the trip, and then that was the only elk we
yeah,
saw.
you always go in with
Um,
great, gigantic expectations of all these things you've dreamed up over the years. And I mean, that first trip was special, don't get me wrong, but the hunting itself was pretty tough that year. And I do blame a lot of that on the full moon. So I don't know if I'll ever go back with a full moon, although we'll get into it here in a little bit as far as there is an
yeah,
advantage with the muzzleloader.
there is. I think muzzleloader hunting. being a resident of Colorado for all those years, there are definitely fewer muzzleloader hunters and they're all rifle hunters. So from like a pressure standpoint, muzzleloader hunting, if you're gonna hunt with a gun, would be my preference, just because you are still in the rut. Colorado has the open sight law, so you can't hunt with a scope. I'm always turned off by it because every year living out there, you'd hear about inevitably someone getting shot. I think there's a lot of pressure out there, and those muzzleloaders, open sight, low light situations. It seemed like every year an archery hunter, someone was shot. I think that is a weird law that Colorado has. So if you're archery hunting, so like we were in there a couple days for muzzleloader this year, we were right at the tail end of it. Archery hunters don't have to wear orange, but muzzleloader hunters do. So just a heads up, if you are going to go during that muzzleloader season, even if you're not taking a muzzleloader, I would wear some kind of orange hat or something. But back to the logistics of the hunt. How many of us went? So it was the three of us on the stream now. So me, Hunter, and Nico. Same three that went last year. Tags this year. I killed a bull last year, so this year I did not purchase a tag, just because didn't want to take an opportunity from anybody else.
Out of
And
state
being a
or two.
non-resident now, those tags are no longer $60. Living
they're
back in Illinois now, those tags are
800.
800.
Yeah.
So
It stings. I'm up to
so
$3,200 in my elk hunting career without a bull, so I'm feeling the pressure a little bit.
could
You could
almost
say
uh,
that's a lot of meat.
yeah. So I was the cameraman on this trip. Nico and Hunter had a bow. Nico did not have a bow for about 6 hours of the trip. We'll get into that as well.
About an
Could
hour
have
and
made
a
all the
half.
difference. Could have made all the difference, honestly.
It timed up bad.
Expectations going in. What would you say your expectations were this year?
For me
Truly.
personally, like I know how tough it is, and being out there, I guess that was that my third year? I think you've been 4 times, Jordan. I think so.
Yeah.
With it being my third time, I've been around it enough to know that anything public land is going to be tough, and I felt like we were going to be around elk the whole time, but with a bow in hand and just the terrain in the particular area we're hunting, I knew it was going to be tough, and I also felt like we were going to have some trouble with some other hunters in the area that we've ran into before. It's similar to what you'd call a community hole in fishing. Everybody kind of knows where the majority of elk are at, and you need to stay around that area. I mean, I would put it in like a 3 mile by 3 mile rectangle, somewhat, of where the majority of the elk are at. So we knew where we were going to key in at, and I felt pretty good about it going in, but at the same time, I knew it was going to be a huge challenge. And I told these guys going in, with 3 of us, it was going to be very difficult to get a bull out. They've done it before with 3 guys, and last year we did it with 4, and it was a pain. But I told them going in, if we can't get that 4th guy, the best possible trip for us might be to have a bull come into range, draw back on it, and never get a clear shot at him. And that's almost exactly what happened. That way you don't have to pack that elk out. So that sounds kind of, I don't know, cowardly, but I like to keep it real a little bit on that, and realize, that it's public land. Your odds are what, 5-10%, especially with a bow. I don't even know if it's that much, but yeah, I think those were my expectations. Not too high, not too low. I know yours were pretty high,
Nico?
Jordan.
Yeah, I think I felt the last 2 years going into that canyon, that make no mistake, like when Hunter's talking about not wanting to drag one of a bull out of there. We've killed 2 in there the last 2 years, and we've learned a lot getting elk out of there. We are it is a roadless area. It is as roadless of an area as you can get without it being designated as a wilderness area. I mean, there's no motorized traffic. There's only there's truly only a few access points into that um, canyon, and that is, I mean, that is what it is. It is a canyon. We're actually hunting down from the top, and it's essentially a cliff face all the way around. So where we're dropping in at, there's only one way in from the bottom and one way out from the top. So, and we are hunting. I mean, if you could create, if you drew a line as far away from the trailhead as you can get between those 2 points that are about 12 miles apart, we're right in the middle. So where we're actually hunting, like where we killed the bull last year, was about 6 miles from either trailhead. Now we've learned not to hike them uphill, to go downhill, but I'd say my expectations going in, like I truly thought we would get a bull. That was recognizing that probably got pretty lucky the last 2 years to run into them, but I thought that we had an even better idea of where they were, what they were doing, to where we were just better prepared. So, like, I really truly thought we would get a bull this year, and I was going to be disappointed if we didn't. So when we left without a bull, um, was definitely a little disappointed. I would say I think the hunting this year was as hard as it's ever been. The pressure, there was more pressure in there, and it's by Colorado standards, it's a very low pressured area, by Colorado elk hunting standards. But this year, we actually felt the pressure of outfitters, of just guys hiking in, and then the bulls not bugling did not help. The weather was warm, the bulls weren't bugling, and we still were really, really close to getting a shot. In fact, I would say you could be, like you said, about as close as we could get without actually getting a bull on the
Yeah.
ground.
And that
We
was,
got a
yeah,
couple times. So.
multiple times. So I mean, we had opportunities, which we'll touch on
Mm.
more in a minute. But Nico, what were some of your expectations coming into the hunt?
Well, I don't know. I kind of thought that they'd be a little more vocal than what they were, especially towards the end of the week, since this is my second year going. Last year we went on the full moon, which I thought kind of messed them up. But this year is about 50%. And it seemed like they bugled pretty good, like 2 or 3 days. The first 2 or 3 we were in there. But they were in such thick stuff that we couldn't really get anything going. So I kind of thought once we got up high where we planned to go originally, we might have a better opportunity because it's a lot more open up there. But it seemed like they weren't up there, and nothing really worked out for us.
Were you expecting two of us to come home with a bull? Were you expecting one, maybe a shot?
I was hoping for 2 of us to come home with the bull.
He was begging for it, and me and Jordan kind of the whole time were like, if it's early,
Absolutely not.
maybe. But then like the last 2 days are like, all right, absolutely not. Nobody takes, don't even take a shot now. But yeah,
So, jumping back into the logistics of it, the drive. So we are coming from extreme southern Illinois, and we're driving all the way across the state of Colorado. So we're hunting the western slope. So for us, for them, it's about an 18-hour drive. I'm 2 hours closer, being up by St. Louis. We were in Nico's Tacoma.
it's the
Um,
taco.
the taco, I will say
It
this.
was like a
Don't know
taco.
if I'll do the taco again. Being I sat in the back the whole way there. It wasn't that bad. I think 3 people doable, 4 people no way. I did sleep in the back most of the way. So I guess if you're gonna go out there, um, full size truck would have been great. That being said, my full size truck leaks oil like a sieve. I don't know if I wanted to drive it that far. We've taken Hunter's truck, I think, like 3 times, so it probably wasn't fair for him to drive
Yeah,
his truck again.
that's all right.
So Nico's truck, I will say, was probably the most trail capable of any of our vehicles. Not that we needed to take it down one, but
Well, I
yeah.
don't know. We'll get into that.
We did get in a little situation, but that was our own fault.
Definitely.
So we left Saturday morning, made it to the trailhead at 3 a.m., which allowed us to hunt on the way in. So I think that was in hindsight, that's really what killed us the first day. I think,
It wasn't that
we,
killed
I
us.
mean,
It was the
weather.
weather.
Yeah, it was the weather.
So we drove
I
through
think the
snow, a little bit of snow on the way there, and then I don't think that area in particular gets a whole lot of rain throughout the year. And the
does
thing
not.
about it is the trails that you're walking on to get in. We knew we had to go uphill for 3 to 4 miles. There's no vegetation on that trail, and I'm pretty sure it rained for about 6 hours, if not most of the day, and the night before, and including the time we got to the trailhead. Like we ended up, I don't even know what you would want to call that experience. I had probably an extra 2, 3 pounds, maybe 4 pounds. It felt like wearing ankle weights all the way up, and mist. Everybody was sweating there. It was still hot. I felt like we still sweated, but
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
yeah. I mean, I thought it was a good
It was like
idea.
walking on a treadmill. It
Yeah.
was like walking on a treadmill underwater. It was not like the mud. Everything was bad. That hike in is, I believe, 4.9 miles to get to where we wanted to be, and it's got about 2,300 feet of elevation gain, which is that's a pretty serious hike in, even for Colorado standards. That's a lot of elevation gain. The last mile, you gain about 800 feet. So the last mile is nearly straight up.
Yeah.
So we got there at 3 a.m. The hike in would have been tough on a dry day. On a wet, sloppy trail where your boots were sinking in, you were sliding at night. It was miserable. That was not a great experience. I think if we got there 12 hours sooner, we get right up the mountain. I think even if we got there 12 hours later, once the sun had come up and had some time to bake some of that mud off the trail, I think that would have been better. We could not have hit that trail at a worse time. So, but the idea going in was that if we got to the trail at 3 a.m., we that first hike in, there was a chance that we could kill a bull on the way in, which still did almost happen, even with the crazy conditions we were going in.
Yeah.
Um, but talking about the drive on the way in, we did encounter.
Weird stuff.
So we are from Illinois. We border Missouri, but we're not from Missouri by any means. So we were not familiar with some of the customs of the Missourians. So coming through Missouri, uh, Saturday morning, or I guess it would have been Saturday during the day when we left,
Yeah.
we saw multiple vehicles with.
Yeah, they had
We thought there
leopards.
was a furry. Yeah, like tiger tails. We thought there was like a furry convention. Everybody was dressed up like tigers on the way in.
Thought
So
it
that
was
threw us off
tiger season in
um,
Missouri.
until we made it into Columbia and realized it was a game day. So that was fun. Um, we ran into, yeah, we hit snow when we got right about the divide in Colorado. So coming through I-70, that drop off when you get to like Silverthorne, Frisco area, right when you dropped into that, um, we had some snow showers. If you're going to go out there, check the interstate. If they close 70, you're going to want to add 4, 5, 6 hours to your drive, depending on where you're going. We were lucky enough that we were able to drive straight through. We saw a Toyota RAV4 pulling an old GMC truck through 7-8% grade,
It's like the
which
steepest section of interstate in America. I don't know if there's a steeper section out there. So that alone made the trip for me. I mean, that's a feat of engineering right there to see a I don't know who was driving it, but they were pretty impressive. We've got our ideas, but we won't go down that rabbit hole.
I think Jordan was
um,
asleep for that,
Yeah, he
but
probably
I
heard
it
us
was
yell.
really
asleep for
fired
that,
me
but
and Hunter up for a couple hours.
It did. It got us
I've
going.
seen some pretty silly things out there. What people try to do in vehicles in Colorado. I mean, the Subaru crowd will. You would think that they drove 3/4 ton diesel trucks. Some of the stuff they try to do.
I would like to think that
So the
RAV4
hunt.
never made it out, though. I think it's still sitting there.
So the hunt. So day one. This is the day we hiked in, so it's a muddy mess. We got, I don't know. I think my pack weighed like 60 pounds. I'm sure your guys's was close. So we had our full camp on our back, with 6 days of gear, clothes, food. Um, I would say the last 2 years, the first note we have on here is we immediately ran into some guys from Pennsylvania before it broke daylight. It's like a mile down the trail. I think the last 2 years we've been in there, I don't know. I think I can remember running into one group of guys back in that canyon that were not like the outfitter who rides people in on horses back in that area. Uh, so seeing someone 1 mile down the trailhead was a surprise for me for sure. And it was their first trip out to that unit, which would end up being like the norm, I guess. We kind of noticed a pattern as we started running into people in that unit.
Yeah.
So 1 mile in, we run into those guys. They were actually very friendly, which I feel like most of the people we meet out there and we run into are extremely friendly. Not including the outfitters, but most other people you meet out there are super helpful, super friendly.
Yeah.
We made it about 2.5, 3 miles by the time daylight broke. And we immediately started hearing bugles not too far above us. So going in, that was kind of I think the dream for me, especially knowing Nico had desires to kill two bulls and I did not. The dream for me was day 0 or day 1 when we're hiking in, we shoot a bull on like the main trail 2-3 miles from camp where it's straight downhill to the truck. And we were very, very close from that coming to reality. Hunter, and I'll kind of let you jump in now because I think you were the one who found the meadow and we kind of took your lead running up at them that first day.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of just hung out, caught our breath in what we now know are called junipers. We really haven't hunted much of this lower ground, but we kind of hung out there and heard a couple bugles go back and forth, and we always kind of gather and think, well, what do we want to do? And I kind of personally just wanted to drop the packs and go right after them. And I first pulled out on X and started looking around the area a little bit, and we had a meadow that was, I don't know, 150, 200 yards, maybe 300 at the most away from the trail. And we've seen some elk over the years come out into these meadows, especially, close to dark. I wasn't real confident that a bull would come out into one, but I thought, what the heck, we might as well go investigate a little bit. And after a little bit of communication back and forth, we decided to start working a little bit through this juniper. And something we've gotten pretty good at, I feel like, over the last 2 or 3 trips is looking on X and trying to find pathways to an area you're trying to get to. You don't just take off the trail and start busting through brush. So we found a decent pathway, kind of went 50 yards at a time, and it kept opening up for us a little bit. It wasn't a tough walk at all. And I think Jordan had actually been in this meadow one time before, and it started looking more and more familiar to him. So we were able to get to that meadow pretty quickly, and the bugles kept coming and kept coming. And I would say whenever we got on the far edge of that meadow, we had a bull fire off at. It sounded like he was right on the other side to me. I don't know if he was 80 to 100 yards maybe at most. And so we sat, and I believe we cow called, didn't we, from that point?
We did, yeah. Right when he bugled, so we had been, me and Evan 2 years prior had chased bulls basically in that exact same area. And the bulls were actually in that meadow the morning 2 years ago that we had before. So we got to that meadow. This was shortly after we ran into those guys from Pennsylvania. But the bulls, they worked their way down the canyon, so we knew they were coming our way. We had the thermals were right, the wind was right. We got set up right on the edge of that meadow, and he ripped a bugle. I mean, it was one of those bugles that's close enough. You drop your pack like
Yeah,
immediately,
it's
and you
on.
get set up to shoot.
Yeah.
Like drop your pack. He's about to step out within bow range. So I thought that bull is what we ranged the opposite side of the meadow to like 54 yards or something.
Yeah, the whole thing. We spread
It was
out.
like right of
we spread
Yeah.
out between me and
It's like,
Nico and tried to cover the whole thing, and I think we could have covered the whole thing if one had stepped out on either end. And
yeah.
it kind of got quiet for a minute, and then we started hearing some cow calls back and forth, and I'm still not sure to this day. I kind of think it was other hunters, maybe the Pennsylvania guys, but it was like they were on the back side of this bull, and we still didn't know at the time. And we let time pass a little bit, and we never bugled at the bull or anything. We kind of just cow called every once in a while, and this bull basically ends up circling us, like a half circle. And I swear this thing bugled, I don't know what he do, 5, 6 times in a period of 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And it was the most bugle tube sounding bugle you've ever heard in your life. Like somebody's standing up here on the hillside hearing us cow call. And so we kind of gave up. I mean, at that point, I think we put our packs down and we start walking around the meadow and checking it out a little bit. And it was a little bit later on. I'd say like 30 minutes, an hour later, we went in that area where we heard the calls coming from that we thought was the guy. And we've set our packs down and stuff, and we're looking around, and sure enough, there's big bull tracks just right there where those noises were coming from. And I don't know, that one still kind of blows my mind. I mean, we were all convinced that that was a person, and after seeing
Yeah.
those tracks, I'm completely convinced that it was a bull. And it just goes to show you can't ever trust the sound of a bugle, whether you think it's one or not.
No. And I think like when we heard him bugle right on top of us, you knew it was a bull. We did hear cow calls. They kind of came up the same direction we were coming from the trail. And they kind of worked their way around us. And I'm still 99% sure that it was either those Pennsylvania guys. They're the only ones we really saw in that area, but pretty sure that those guys also heard the bugles up on the hill, and kind of followed us in, which I think at least threw me off, knowing that, hey, there's other hunters in the area. And then the bull shut up for a little bit, and then down towards the trail again is where we heard that bugle tube, or what I was convinced was a bugle tube, rip off, like bugle, bugle, bugle from the same spot. And it like Hunter said, sounded like the most bugle tube call you'd ever heard. Um, and it was I assume that it was those guys had kind of went back down to the trail and were just trying to locate the real bull again. But like you said, when we made our way back down towards the trail, there was clear as day that bull you could see where he had been standing right there off the trail. Um,
Yeah.
Due to the rain that we had, the
Yeah.
trail was so muddy, like you knew that the tracks were, I mean, you could tell that they were fresh, brand new tracks. So that was probably our first missed opportunity. We never laid eyes on that bull. That's stuff we're hunting out in Western Colorado. Like Hunter said, it's hard to find your way through it. It's all low country desert. It's oak brush. It's like walking through a wire brush. I mean, it is terrible stuff to try to navigate through. We were actually so low at that point, we weren't even into the oak brush yet. We were down in the junipers, which is more huntable, but we had never really encountered bulls that low before. Usually they were much higher up the mountain.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was day one. We ended day one. We didn't make it to our like desired camping spot, more towards the top. We say the top, but we were still under the rim, or like, off the edge of the canyon. We were trying to get up to, I believe it was like 8,600 feet, that's pretty low Colorado standards, but that's, for where we hunt, that's usually where we encounter the bulls. All the roads are up high and they're down low, but that middle country in between, like the roads that go to the peaks and then the roads that are down like in town, that middle area seems to be where we always find the bulls. So we camped down low, I think at like 7,500 or 7,400 or something, maybe something around there. But we didn't make it all the way up just because we ended up hunting that bull that morning. We were so exhausted, we decided to stop. And since we had run into bulls down low, we just decided, hey, let's give it one more morning down here to see if we find anything. So set up camp. Day two, the weather was clear, a little windy, which was nice. We were hoping that it would kind of bake the trail and turn it from a sloppy mess into something more navigable. Woke up that morning. We didn't get up super early because we really didn't know where to go. We felt like we were camped. We were actually camped in another large meadow. It was right off the trail, but it was in an area that, again, 2 years prior, me and Evan had seen bulls actually in chasing cows. So we felt like we were in a pretty good area. So we kind of woke up. We'll call it late, but it was breaking daylight when we got out of our camp. And immediately, I don't remember if somebody glassed a bull literally from inside of the tent. The bull was up on a hillside, about, I think we ranged it at like 250 or 300 yards right outside of our tent, in the oak brush and again, the thickest terrain that was out there. But got a pretty good view of the bull. Wasn't a giant, but a nice bull. And we tore off after that bull. And once we got in the brush, more bulls either joined them or there were more bulls on the mountain, that we found once we got in there.
Yeah. I think you forgot about the big bull though. The first night. That was the first night.
Oh,
Can you
you're
believe
right.
that? That's what the first
I didn't realize that was the first night.
the first night or the first day was so action packed. I mean, it's incredible how much stuff went on. But that first night, whenever we had set up camp, I think we ate. Did we all eat dinner pretty early? And we were actually starting to
Yeah.
relax. Well, I say relax, but we actually probably got our boots off for the first time and sat down. And I think Nico had would you have your tripod with your binoculars out? And he's sitting there looking
Yeah.
across the canyon at the other side because we've got a really good view of it. And I'd say it's a solid, I don't know, 45 minutes before it's going to be too dark to shoot on us. And I think he spotted maybe a cow or something on the other side. And we kept hearing this bugle. And this bugle kept sounding like it was coming on the other side of the canyon. So we're really not thinking too much about it. And, I kind of get to thinking, I'm like, if that thing is right where it sounds, we ought to be able to see it because it's in pretty visible, like the juniper bushes that are real green. You can see pretty much through them. And it keeps going on. And then it finally, it sounded like it had turned and faced us or something a little bit different, a little bit louder. And I'm thinking in my head, Nico, I think this bull might be on our side. He's just bouncing off this freaking cliff that's in front of us. And so we drop off like 20 yards below our tent. And mind you, it's 10 minutes before dark now, or you can't even shoot. And here's this bull at like 350 yards, just a big bull. And you'll get to see him on the video that we're going to post. He was able to get him on the mag view, and that's one of the biggest bulls I've seen there. Probably the second biggest one, you think, Jordan, that we've seen? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
nice one.
I think looking at it again through the mag view, he probably wasn't as big as we initially thought, but he was a
I thought he
big
was
six
bigger.
pointer, which I mean, for what's essentially an over-the-counter unit in Colorado, seeing a bull of that caliber, a big 6 point, with the big whale tails, and it was a big bull. I mean, no doubt about it. For that area that we're in, like I said, an over-the-counter unit, I mean, that's a big bull for that unit. There's no doubt about it. Definitely bigger bulls in Colorado, but you're not going to find that many in a public over the counter area. So that was definitely the bull that you wanted in that unit. I don't know how many bulls you'd find bigger, but just a really big old 6 point. He was the only bull. I don't want to say the only bull, but for our trip, a lot of the bulls, they just, like the thermals, they just didn't seem to really care about them. Not that we used thermals poorly, but like they would walk with the wind
Yeah.
on their back.
They do
So
the
it was like
opposite of what you'd actually think they do, a lot of them. And I think they're maybe young age.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure if they're not educated yet or what the situation is on that one. But he was actually doing it like he
That was
should.
a smart bull.
Yeah, he was waiting until those
He
thermals
was
switch to
he
come
was
back up.
down in the nastiest canyon where I don't even think a cat could get him down there. And then right at dark when the thermal started dropping, he would go uphill. All the other bulls, mind you, are coming downhill at that time. He's going, he's playing the thermals right, where even if you could get to him, which you really couldn't where he was, but even if you could get to him, he was going to win you. So, I mean, that was just a big, old, smart bull. He had some cows with him. I didn't realize that was the first night, but yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
was fun to see the first night to see a bull of that caliber.
that's also part of me that pains me is knowing that. So the first day we've already had an opportunity and close to probably two opportunities, and with a bow once again, you can't reach out 300 yards, unfortunately. I mean, I guess we could start flinging them if we
Right.
don't ever feel like we're going to get an
And that
opportunity, but
was and that first day we were in there was the last day of muzzleloader season. We were not hunting with the muzzleloader, but I mean,
we
I
could
think
have cut the
Nico glassed it to
distance.
that bull. We were around 300 yards. You could have cut 100, 150 yards to that bull pretty quick and got a shot off on him. We didn't attempt with bows, but that was a situation where we've never muzzleloader hunted, but I
It's
mean, there was no pressure. We were the only one on that bull
yeah.
that far in there, and it was like
It's got us thinking
that would
more
have
and
been
more.
something you would have at least
Yeah.
got a shot off on him. And then second day, which I was kind of going into before, we wake up, and so from the tent where we glass the bull below us, we wake up and there's a bull above us, probably 250, 300 yards. We glassed him up on the side of a hill, and we were watching him. The way that canyon runs and just the way those bulls work, they all go downhill. And so the way that bull was angled, it would have been a little bit of a task to get right on him. We probably would have had to backtrack down the trail a little bit, which I don't think we wanted to do. Um, but then shortly after that, we heard a bull bugle above us. That was a huntable bull. And that is the one we ended up going after that second day. So all the terrain that we were in for the most part above us was that super thick oak brush. We were on our hands and knees at one point trying to get through it. I mean, it is stuff you couldn't shoot. You couldn't shoot 5 yards. You can barely. There's a lot of parts of it. I don't even know if you can draw your bow back in, let alone shoot an arrow. And that's right where those bulls were. They run those game trails. They know them so well. We, of course, do not. So we went after that bull. We got within about 55 yards. We were actually, me and Hunter were weaving our way through. Nico, we tried to split up just to give us a better chance at him. The bulls were bugling that day. Um, we got within 55 yards. It was so thick. There was just no real opportunity. Even if we cut that distance in half on that bull and got to 25 yards, you wouldn't have been able to get a shot at him. But it was cool to have that experience again on the second day. And we knew that it wasn't the bull that we saw the night before because we got a good look at him. We knew it wasn't the bull that we glassed up first thing in the morning. So we knew at that point we had seen at minimum three bulls, and there was a really good chance it wasn't the bull we ran into the first morning either. So, I mean, the first 24 hours of the hunt, we were within 4 or 5 bulls and got within, 55 yards. So I thought we were on pace at that point that we were for sure going to make something happen. And I was pretty confident that we might make something happen pretty quick.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I thought after the first two days we were going to be in for a really really interesting week, especially the way they were talking. But we'll get to that here in a minute. I think
Yeah.
does that pretty much sum up day 2? I can't remember what I've got here.
Yeah, so we got back to camp and then we ran into another group of hunters. They were coming down the trail. They were from Wisconsin.
Yep.
Was it Wisconsin or
Yeah,
Minnesota?
they were Wisconsin.
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 So we ran into some guys from Wisconsin. So at this point, we've run into 2 groups of hunters, which is 2 more than we had seen. I don't think we ran into anybody last year.
No,
We ran into some people
on the
on
way
the
out.
way.
On the
They were
way
like,
in, we did.
Yeah.
but they were packing out, and we were.
Yeah.
I think we were less than a mile from the truck at that point.
Yeah.
Last year at
Yeah.
least. This was the first time that 3-4 miles in there we had seen anyone in several years. So this was kind of an oddity to have seen two different groups of hunters, and these hunters as well. This was their first time in the unit, which for where we're hunting, I mean, even if you're looking on Onyx, we're at a weird elevation at that point. We're like 7,500 feet, which is not where you would think you'd be running into bulls. We're just in a weird location. Nothing about that area really jumps out at you other than it's roadless, but there's a lot of roadless areas in those units. So thought it was odd. We ran into another group of hunters. They told us a story about they had a bear snap at them, snapping its jaw, a big cinnamon black bear. That basically exactly where we camped the year prior, which I thought was interesting. He was trying to explain it to us, and he was explaining it to us basically exactly where we were camped, up on a shelf with a pond. And I was like, that is exactly where we were.
Yeah.
So to hear that they ran into a bear up there who was being, for a black bear, sounded pretty aggressive. That was a little eye opening. I mean, I was in that area a lot. We've hunted it 4 times. I mean, deer hunting out there, I never saw a bear. I mean, I would deer hunt, you know, a week. I'd elk hunt a week. We turkey hunted. I mean, we hunted all over Colorado. We trout fished. Never saw the bear. And then it seems like every hunter we run into out there is like, oh yeah, we've been seeing bears every day. So I don't know if I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I always had a bear tag on me, and I could never run into a bear. In this trip again, we no bears. We didn't see any bears. We always see bear sign. This is an area that's very high population of bears. No bears. So
Yeah, and
I think
I would
I know
add to
you
that.
probably see that as a good thing,
I,
but
I
I've
would
always
just
wanted to
I would add to that
see
that
one.
it's really surprising to me too because we haven't really been. I don't think we've been that good with keeping our food away from camp, or like me and Nico, we've had peanut butter just laying around at
Yeah,
times. I mean,
you guys. Those two are not bear aware, and every year they make me nervous. I was at night rounding up Nico's peanut butter and food and hanging it in a tree like 100 yards away from camp because I
yeah,
was like, the last thing I want is to wake up and have a bear on top of me.
I will
But
say
we seem to
perspective.
never
Yeah,
run into them when we're out there.
perspective totally changed though after we ran into the Wisconsin guys because even that morning I had left my pistol out of the holster in the tent for the first time, and the Wisconsin kid said the same thing. He was like, "We got in this situation," and I'm looking at his holster over here on the side. His pistol's not in there either, so he had the same thing happen to him. And from that point on, I carried the rest of the week. We made sure we tried to burn our trash. It's kind of embarrassing how bad we were at actually getting a fire going when we needed it. It's pretty wet, but yeah, me and Jordan
Yeah,
have been making fun
trying to
of
burn our leftover food, or at least.
what's the Netflix
Um,
show that we were
yeah,
watching?
and I will say, like, we found out last year a statistic like black bear attacks pretty low. Like, they
No,
don't really
yeah,
happen, especially in Colorado. But you still want to be aware. And we probably weren't the best at it. You're probably in more danger of getting stomped on by a cow when you're sleeping. But didn't see any cattle up there either this year, which was also an oddity. I think there was just a lot of. This year was just, I don't know if it was just a weird year or if everything was connected in a weird way, but we usually see a lot of cattle up there. Didn't see any cattle. We never see deer, probably because we're hunting so low, but we just never see deer in that area. We saw a ton of mule deer, and all the hunters we were running into were like, oh, this place is full of deer. And in the 4 years I had been in that area, never seen a deer
yeah.
that low on the mountain. So,
I think
end of day 2, we decided the trail had kind of hardened up a little bit. We decided to go back up to where we were originally planning on hunting. So sounds weird for us to leave all of those elk we were in, but essentially what we were trying to do is we had camped that morning below the oak brush, kind of down in the junipers. We were trying to get above the oak brush into the aspens, into the older oak brush that's more open, where we had had success the 2 years prior, where it was just we knew you can hunt up there. So if the bulls were bugling that low, the assumption was, well, they're always up high. We kind of always ran into them in the same areas. Usually a lot of them. So we thought, well, they're probably up there. They're probably bugling. And if we just run into them like we are down here, but we're up top, we're not going to run into this situation where a bull is 55 yards and you can't even draw your bow back. You're going to be able to cut that distance and actually get a shot on one. So we hiked up to the top. We scouted around a little bit that first night. We never have had great luck in the afternoon, but that would change on day 3.
Almost.
So almost.
Yeah.
So we got up. We went over to where um, I had shot the bull the year before. That's also where me and Evan had ran into the most bulls. There's a bunch of meadowy areas up there where it's just you can move on the bulls really well. There's just enough cover to keep you hidden, but it's just open enough. There's like pockets of open areas that are tucked into this real tall oak brush. So it's like you can move without the bull seeing you, and you can also just basically still stalk them. So we went into that area. We ran into more hunters up there. Again, out of state. I think they were from Tennessee. Is that correct?
Those are the guy. Well,
We
night
ran into the guy at camp.
number 3,
Yeah,
the guy from
Tennessee.
Tennessee came in. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was super cool. He actually saw it. And this is a huge area up there. And he ran into us and was like, hey guys, you guys are up here. I'm camped like a mile away. I'll stay out of this area. We encouraged him to actually come and
Yeah.
like hunt the area we were going to be in. If nothing else, just to meet back up and get information. Um, Also, I don't think it's a horrible thing sometimes up in that area. There's not a lot of people up there pressuring them around, and it's open enough that I don't always think it's the worst thing if there's another group up there moving the elk around a little bit. But he was really cool. He told us he wasn't going to come up that way if we were up that way, even though it was public land. There was plenty of room. Sounded like he was alone, but he said he had other hunters. Sounded like maybe he was in a little tiff with some of the guys he was with. But no luck that morning, so we kind of were chilling out. We knew where a wallow was. If you've watched our video from the year before, we had found a wallow last year that we had a cow come into. So we knew where a wallow was. It was really warm during the day, and even at night, it was just really warm, like temperature wise out there, pretty much the whole week. So we decided we were going to go hunt the wallow. Nico decided to draw his bow back on the way to the wallow, maybe 10 steps out of camp, just to
Well,
make sure his peep and everything was
it
on.
was kind of my fault,
Um,
though. I'll go ahead and say that my peep sight has had some issues from time to time of being turned into my line of sight a little bit. So before we left camp, well, Jordan was resting. He was gonna rest out that night. He's like, I'm
yeah.
tired. I don't want to go. But he was. We talked him into it. We were all 3 gonna go sit this thing, and so I draw my bow back, and I'm like, Nico, can you turn my peep a little? I just want to get a good line of sight here, make sure everything's lined up. So he gets my peep lined up. Everything's great. I let off. And earlier, I think even in the day or the day before, he goes, just don't dry fire it. And I was like, don't worry. I haven't done that before. Well, I think then in his mind, he needed to check his peep. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I wanted to look at mine too since we were looking at yours.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
you go ahead.
I drew it back with my hand. I didn't have a release or an arrow in it or anything. Looked at my peep. It looked all right. Then I went to let it down, and I guess I torqued it a little bit, letting it down, and ended up derailing the string off the cams. So that's not good,
No.
usually.
No.
So we stood around and looked at it for about 15, 20 minutes. I kind of decided that I was going to tell you guys to go and see if I could work my magic on it. So pulled out some paracord, a couple zip ties, and it was the Matthews lift that I was shooting. So if you know about the Matthews cams, they have little tabs on them for their, they call it a stay afield system that they sell. If you need to make any adjustments, you can kind of, it's like a bow press, but it just compresses your limbs using your cams, I guess. So I tied some slip knots around those little hooks and pretty much leaned my whole body on it, trying to compress it down as much as I could. And at one point, I had it tied around a tree, trying to pull it. And then I figured I could use some zip ties and get that paracord as tight as I could around the cams, and then take the zip ties and pull the paracord towards the riser and tighten those up so it would compress the cams using the cables. And I don't know, it probably took me another 30 minutes. I finally ended up getting the string back on and put an arrow in it, put my release on, took one of my Crocs and set it on the hillside, went about 15 yards back, shot it using my 20-yard pin, and it was about 4 inches high or so. So I figured that was about right if it was at 20 yards. And Matthews also has, they have little holes on their cams that you can look through and see your cables. So if your cables are both in the center of those holes, there's one on each cam, you should still be in time for your
And you were in
mods.
time. You were
I
still.
was in time.
How bad
I
were
still
me and?
haven't
So,
looked
well,
at it.
Nico,
Go ahead.
I still haven't looked at it in my actual bow press or not, but I think it's all right.
so while Nico is doing this, me and Hunter are, for at least the first, when he first started, we were looking on in horror because we're, at this point, we are at our destinations. We are as far away from the road as you can get, like 4.9 miles in. Nico has a bow with slip knots, paracord, trees, and all I could think was he's going to lose a finger. We
Yeah.
are going to have to tourniquet him, and me and Hunter are going like, I don't know how we're going to Nico off the mountain. If he were to get his, if he gets his finger, he can walk off the mountain. But if that thing snaps and on his leg, or like, I don't know what we're going to do. So like, I was super nervous. I think me and Hunter, I know we really thought hard about, do we leave him here alone with that bow and then come back to find his arm mangled?
Yeah.
But I think just the stress of him attempting it and knowing that there was nothing we could do to stop him from attempting it, it was either we sat there and we watched him, which probably would have pissed Nico off because
I think
we
he
were over the
was.
shoulder
Yeah.
telling him to stop, or we could leave and sit the wallow, in which case we would just sit there the whole time awaiting Nico's fate when we returned. So we decided we would go sit the wallow. So instead of having two shooters spread out across the wallow, me and Hunter would go, I would film. Um, One of the great things about hunting there, I guess, depending on your perception, is you get phone service on a lot of parts of that mountain. Some people don't like that. Some people want to be off the grid. But for a safety standpoint, having phone service where we were hunting allowed us to communicate. And also, if Nico snapped his finger off, he would be able to get a hold of us. So we went and sat the wallow, messaged Nico. He had messaged me back and was like, I'm good. We're all right. And I was like, okay. So that at least made me feel a little bit better that if Nico snapped his arm in there, he could at least text us and we would know about it. We wouldn't find out about it at dark and find him wrapped up in cables. But that hunt ended up being our closest chance to a bull on the whole trip, I would say. We've never had luck in the afternoon. I didn't even want to go sit the wallow in the afternoon just because it's kind of a pain to get in there. It's an open area, but all around it is super thick. It's really close to the elk's bedding area. So we get in there. Hunter sits the exact same spot we saw it last year, which essentially is 15 yards from the wallow. There's a big steep hill in front of us. Behind that is some aspens and a boulder field. Above us on the hill, it's pretty open. You can shoot probably 40, 50 yards. But maybe what really did us in was right where we had sat the year before, a dead aspen had fallen right where we would always sit. And that aspen kind of created almost a barrier between us and that hillside where we were hidden in there really well for a bull coming off that hillside to the wallow, but it would prevent us from moving on anything on that hillside because you would have to crawl up over that deadfall. So we sat there for a couple hours. We cow called every 30 minutes. I think I only cow called 4 times. We were there for like 2 hours. I called like every 30 minutes. Didn't hear anything back. To be honest, I was kind of disinterested. I felt like we were probably wasting time just because we had just never really had luck in the afternoon. I was worried about Nico. um, and then right at sunset, Hunter stood up. We knew it was like the last 30 minutes. Hunter stood up and looked at me, and I believe you said,
I said we ain't gonna have to
what did
hunt.
you say to me, man?
So we had ran into some guys earlier in the day that were. One of them kind of drove me up a wall a little bit. He was very, very confident, and one of the things he said to us when he was leaving is, "I'm not gonna have to worry about tomorrow, boys. I'm gonna be hauling one out tonight." And that kind of stuck with me, and we kind of made fun of that, the rest of the day, because I don't think I've ever been that confident in my life. But I told Jordan and Nico, I'm like, hey, we're gonna do the same thing. It's go time now. Like, we're just gonna be like this guy, and maybe it'll work out for us after all the great stories we heard from him. And so I told Jordan, I was like,
And
don't worry about tomorrow. It's getting ready to happen in 5 minutes.
And to be clear, this was a guy that we had run into. He was actually an outfitted hunter. So he had been dropped off in there by an outfitter. They had horses.
It's a whole
I believe it was a
nother,
drop camp. He didn't.
yeah, it's a whole nother
He had a drop
podcast.
camp, but he was very confident. He kind of told us where to hunt, which we had been in there enough to know that where he was telling us was not
It was
an
where
area you
not to
wanted to
hunt,
be in.
basically.
Yeah, but he was telling us to go check out these areas that we were pretty confident was not the spot we wanted to be, but we were also in the spot he wanted to be. So he let us know that he kills big whitetails every year in Indiana. He kills big bulls in that canyon every year. And it wasn't nothing to get one off that canyon. He didn't know why we were so concerned about carrying one off our back. But
Yeah.
this is a man who had an outfitter with a
Horses.
trailer full of horses to get anything off the canyon for him. He also had a wall tent. He had a stove. He probably had a porcelain toilet in there too. So he was really confident. So yeah, Hunter looked at me, and I think I said something about the morning hunt. Like, where do you want to go in the morning? And he said, you don't got to worry about the morning because I'm about to shoot one right now. And it wasn't no sooner that the last word left his mouth, and we heard a big branch snap, and I was like, oh. And when you hear that, sometimes you hear something, and you're like, what was that? Sometimes you hear something, and you're like, that's an elk. And when we heard that, we were like, that's a bull. We knew he was coming off that hillside. Elk had come off that hillside before on us, sounded exactly the same. We knew where he was coming from, and we both, I mean, we got the cameras ready. We thought that he was going to drop right into that wallow, 15 steps. Hunter had a perfect in that deadfall. I mean, he was hidden perfectly. We'd had cows come down to that wallow before and sat there 15 yards, no idea we were there. And I mean, we had a good wind. We were like, this is it. Thermals were coming down. He was coming down. We heard that snap, felt like forever. It's probably only 4 or 5 minutes, but that bull came in very slow. He was meticulous. He was very direct. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had heard us cow calling. It took us probably 5-10 minutes before we even heard him again or saw him. We heard him take another step. I was able to I was probably 5, I don't know. I wasn't far behind Hunter, but I was just far enough. I had a little different view up the hill. And saw I saw the body of an elk standing there. Wasn't sure what he was at first. Hunter looked at me and said, "Let me know what he is."
Legal bull
And
is
he
what I
said,
asked.
"Let me know if he's legal." He said, "Let me know if he's legal." So the bull at that point, I let out another cow call, which hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have done because I think it really helped that bull pinpoint where we were. But he was moving in so slow. We were running out of daylight. My concern was he's already looking for us. He might just turn around and leave. If I give him one more cow call, we're hidden in here enough. If he can just take a few more steps towards this wallow, Hunter's going to have a 15-yard broadside shot at him. So gave him one more cow call. The bull started to take steps towards us, towards the wallow. I got a good look at him. It was a nice bull, more than a legal bull. Not a trophy, but for an over-the-counter unit, it was a very good bull. And he took a couple steps at us. I tapped Hunter on the shoulder and I said, "Big bull," and he's coming, because I thought he was coming right into the wallow. Had the camera going, was recording.
Where are
The
you?
bull stopped for a while. The
Do you have
bull
the SD
stopped for a
card in?
while. I unrecorded because at this point it had been a long time. I was a little worried about SD length. The bull was taking a very long time to move. It seemed like he was standing in place forever.
That's not a lie. You didn't look at the SD card length. You don't even know if the camera
Yeah.
battery's in your camera half the time. Ah, shoot,
Oh,
the
I was
camera's
right on him.
dead.
So the bull starts turning, not working away from us, but not walking directly at us like he was. He basically did a circle around us. Hunter's ready with his bow. The bull walks to, he's shaking. The bull walks, instead of coming to the wallow, he actually came around, and at every step he turns and is looking in to try to pick us out of that deadfall. He would take a step, look, try to pick us out, take another step. That deadfall we were hiding in was great. He couldn't see us, but he also never saw the cow he was looking for, and it also prevented Hunter from moving. If Hunter could have moved back 5 feet, if that deadfall isn't there, he can maybe shimmy to where I am. The bull for me was 35 yards broadside, wide open. There's a little bit of brush, but between me and the center mass of that bull, there was nothing. He had a tree in front of his face. Where Hunter was standing, he just didn't have a shot. So
yeah, I mean, I could
that bull
see
stood there.
all I could see was his right antler and just this gigantic body facing me that looked like a freaking horse. And when I saw that at like 30, 35 yards, I was shaking like a leaf. Like I had all these scenarios playing through my head. I kept thinking, we've thought about this and we've mentioned it a couple times, but I'm like, he's going to come into the wallow, which looking back at it, I don't think he really had anything to do with the wallow. He was coming to the calls. But I just kept imagining he's going to come to the wallow. I'm going to get a 15-yard shot. I'm going to spine him. Not on purpose. Not on purpose at all. But I'm going to spine him because he's so close. He's going to fall in the wallow. And we're going to have to build some kind of cribbing or something to try to... We're going to have to invent a new method to not gut this thing, but quarter it. I mean, how do you... Nico might have to build a paracord winch.
It's a big, deep wallow that thing is in. If a bull fell in it, he would nearly be submerged.
Yeah, it would be a legitimate issue. So those are the things that are going through my head when this bull's held up, and then Jordan's sitting over there recording. Well, he thinks he's recording, but he's actually on standby. So to say we were tore up is an understatement.
And what was going through my mind is I got this bull standing at 35 yards. I didn't have a bow, I didn't have a tag, but what's going through my mind is, for one, why isn't Hunter shooting it? Because from my view, it's a broadside 35-yard. When is Hunter going to draw back and shoot this thing? Because I don't know what Hunter's looking at. And then the bull turns, goes up the hill. I don't think he ever saw us. He definitely didn't smell us. I just think he was in that area for a while. He never saw the cow. And then the first thought I had when he left was, if only Nico hadn't have broke his bow, we would have been more spread out in here. And just maybe he would have been sitting. Even if he's sitting where I'm at, he gets a shot. But I mean, any one more bow in there, maybe you get a chance at that bull, because he was at 35 yards and walked nearly a quarter circle around us. So my mind was, that was a really good opportunity, and we just got super unlucky in that moment that Nico wasn't there, that you didn't have a clear lane at him, that you weren't standing where I was standing.
I got another question for you. When we went back to camp, we were talking about the story a little bit, and I believe you mentioned that you stood up in the middle of this. Is that true? Did you,
Correct.
Nico? Do
Yeah.
you remember that?
I
And
remember
the
this.
first time I heard it, and I'm like, well, at what point did you stand up? Because he was only
So
30
you didn't see
yards.
me stand up, Hunter? Well, Hunter was
I
only
didn't have a.
5 feet from me, and he never saw me stand up. So if that tells you anything about how stealthy I was, the bull.
He had a
At one
clear
point, I
line.
could see the bull. I could see the bull at 35 yards, barely. I heard some sticks crunch. I had actually thought the bull was moving towards the wallow, and there was so much brush in between us and that wallow that I thought that was my opportunity to get a better vantage point for when he stepped out. Unbeknownst to me, the bull was actually walking, had turned and went the other way. So the bull was walking around. But from the time I stood up, the bull continued to move around us.
At what
I don't
point
think
did you
he ever knew
stand
we
up,
were
though?
there, but I stood up when the bull started moving to walk, like when he stopped,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought he moved towards the wallow, but he went the other way. That is when I had stood up from a crouched position because I was crouched behind a giant deadfall tree. So I had stood up behind the tree. I'm convinced the bull, there's no way he saw me because he kept walking. He stopped several more times, was looking in. Hunter might see it differently,
No, I
but
think ultimately after you tell what happens here on day 4, we'll get into a couple of the lessons that we think we've learned in this case, and I think we kind of hit the nail on the head and know exactly what was causing some of these issues on these bulls that were coming in. But yeah, that was a heck of
so
a heck of a night on what was that, day 3 or day 4? That was day
yeah.
3.
And we did get the bull on video. I have checked on the thing. It is on there. It is not, like I said, I ran the camera, turned it off, thought I turned it back on when the bull, basically when I stood up, I thought I had hit record again. I did not. So I did not get the bull broadside at 35 yards. I did get him moving through the trees at like 40 yards coming in, but that's on me.
It's
Hand
typical.
up.
It's
Got to
typical.
be better on the record button.
Yeah.
I filmed Hunter. He was super excited after the bull left. He was shaking. And I peeked down to see how long I had been recording for and saw the dreaded standby on the camera and knew that I had messed up.
Yeah.
So
So you missed my
there's
reaction
nothing
too.
worse. There's nothing worse. No, we got it on the GoPros that were on the log. But
Okay,
there's
good.
nothing worse than hunting with Hunter and not hitting record because he gives me so much grief about saying I never hit record. My camera batteries are always dead. So I don't like to add fuel to that fire, but I definitely did on day 3.
Yeah, and I think I told you
Um,
after that all happened that it was a really good thing that that bull didn't come in at 15 yards, and I arrowed him just perfectly on film, and
Probably.
we go back
Although I
and
did have
look
a
at the footage, and
GoPro.
it's
I
not
did have a
there.
GoPro facing Hunter and the wallow. That would have been on. But yeah, he should have had the Tacticam on his bow. No one wanted to put Tacticam on their bow, but that's a story for a different time as well.
Nico, why?
So we go back down to camp.
Go ahead.
We go back down to camp on day 3. We find Nico at the tent. He's got his bow fixed miraculously. He explained how he did it. Still blows my mind that he was able to MacGyver that thing. I would have just said my hunt's over, probably thrown my bow off a cliff. So day 4, we wanted to go hunt back in the same area that we hunted the morning of day 3. So not the wallow, but in that open oak brush aspen area where we typically run into a lot of elk. So we got there super early. We got to basically the exact site where we had heard the bulls the morning before that. The same general area where we had run into the bulls the year before. We get in these patchy open meadow area. We get there nice and early. Sat there for like an hour in the dark, it felt like. Kind of ate breakfast there. It's starting to break daylight. I believe, and I'll let you guys, you can tell this part of the story. I believe I said multiple times, we need to spread out. We need to get further apart. But it was super early. We were not hearing any bugles. Just at the crack of daylight, I was cow calling every 10, 15 minutes. I was at this point standing 15, 20 yards behind Hunter and Nico. Because after the encounter we had the night before, we had kind of decided we probably shouldn't call right on top of the person with the bow. We should probably get me behind. That would make it much harder to film, but
Yeah.
probably create a situation where the elk would get in closer in range. So my idea would be, it was open enough in there and that oak brush you can move around in it quite a bit, would be to drop back and call 20 yards behind you guys and then sneak back up with the camera. So it kind of sounded like elk were walking around, and also I was calling 20, 25 yards behind you. But then if the elk came in, I was back next to you guys with the camera. So that was my thought process through all of that. And while I was down there cow calling and making a stir, Hunter looked down at me and was like, "Hey, hey, hey, I see something."
Yeah, it's like, hey, shut up, don't make another noise. Yeah, me and Nico were basically just sitting there and looking through the one window that we had up in front of us, and it's just breaking daylight, and like Jordan said, he's 15, 20 yards. It's almost more so to the side of us than it was directly behind us, but he was off of a little bit of a slope. Looking back, which we'll get into here later, I think we probably need to be further going forward, but it's hard to film, like we mentioned. But I'm looking through this window, and all of a sudden, just like the night before, except for this time, I don't hear anything. This is just purely visual. I catch a glimpse of the big tan body that they have, the big chest, just motion through the oak bush in front of me, and I kind of stare at that spot, and I'm like, did I really just see something move right there? And Jordan's like, we need to spread out more. We need to spread out more. There could be one come in silent, and he's right. But I think if we were spread out, we were probably going to be spread out horizontally and not one person in front of the other in this case. But sure enough, I catch that motion again, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a bull, or I assume it's a bull. I don't know. It could have been a cow, I guess, at this point. It was a huge body, and I freak out to Nico. Nico, do you even remember what I said to you? I have no idea.
I don't remember. I just remember seeing something big and brown busting through a bunch of trees.
Yeah. So he's only 45 yards at this point, and I tell Nico, I was like, hurry up, get your bow, wrap around to the side. So we spread out at that point, a little bit too late. But just like the night before, I mean, this bull doesn't, I don't think he took another step further, and I don't know if he caught some of the noise we made, or if once again he came to the cow call and didn't see the cow standing there. I mean, we had a little bit of an opening in front of us, but he turns out he basically spins a circle on us. We never hear him break off or anything, but a lot of what we heard this week or last week was the bull barking at us. And I don't know that we had ever heard that prior to this year. Maybe you had a few times, but I hadn't personally. And yeah, I'm still not positive on what spooked that bull, but once again, like 45 yards through a bunch of thick junk. I mean, if you have a muzzleloader or a rifle or something, you could have taken a shot at that bull. I mean, it wouldn't probably have been the most ethical shot, but it just happened so fast, and we tried to maneuver around and basically hunt the oak bush that he was in, and we thought that maybe there's a few different avenues that he could take out of there, but I really don't know where he ended up at. But it was just another really close call, and a bull that made absolutely no noise coming in.
Yeah. And to kind of pile on top of that, that morning we didn't hear a bugle
No.
at all. So the morning before we heard a few bugles in the area. Seemed like every day we heard less bugles. That was the first day where it was just silent. We didn't hear any bugles. We knew we were in an area with a lot of elk because we were seeing the elk. We called in an elk silent the night before. We called in that bull that morning. I was confident it was a bull because it did bark at us. I hadn't been barked at a lot while like elk hunting, but I know when like deer hunting out there and like fishing and even just like driving around, um, they make that like you said, almost sounds like a dog barking at you, like sound.
Like a
And
moose.
sounds a little different. Sounds a little different than the cows do. So when I heard it, I was like, wow, that was a bull. But like I said, when they bark at you like that, it's almost like a hey, like a whitetail blowing. It's like, hey, I don't like what's going on here. I'm getting out of here. I don't think that bull. I mean, he didn't wind us. We had the right wind. I'm really. I don't buy into that elk see a whole lot they don't like, especially when it's that dark and you're in that oak brush. Like maybe they see movement and it freaks him out, but like hearing us, he probably did hear us walk around, but with the cow calls, like I just don't know if that would have bothered him a whole lot. Those elk make so much noise moving around. I think the same thing. I think we were in a meadow, we were making cow calls. I think he got to a point kind of above us and to the side where he had that window we saw him through, he was using to look into that meadow. He said, "Hey, there's no cows in there, something's off. I'm gonna get out of here." And I think that's exactly what he did. And he said, I'm gonna go somewhere else." So
Yeah,
um, that was our.
that pretty
I
much.
mean, that was really our encounter for.
Yeah,
It's really our encounter for day 4. We went back to camp. We didn't have any luck that afternoon. Did we? We sat that wallow that
yeah,
night, did we not?
yeah. And
Day
it
4, we
Yep.
was
went back,
the
sat the wallow. We didn't hear anything. We didn't hear any bugles. We weren't hearing any bugles at night, even. It didn't seem like it was a situation where it was the moon. I mean, it just seemed like that was kind of, they were just waning down. The rut was waning down. It seemed like we just weren't in that kind of hot zone we had been in the years prior, where it was bulls, running around on the mountain chasing cows, bugling their heads off. It definitely seemed more like,
yeah,
the bulls they were being smart. They
and
weren't going to make a stupid mistake because they were chasing a cow. You weren't going to be able just to walk up on one chasing a cow or bugling or wallowing where they're not paying attention. Like this year, that they weren't bugling. They were being very meticulous. They were being very direct with what they were doing. They were coming in, they were looking around. Hey, I don't see something I like. I'm getting out of here. And I think in the past, we had not. I mean, the past 2 bulls we killed, they were screaming their head off with cows, and we literally just walked up and shot the bull. We made a ton of noise. I mean, even the wind wasn't great when I shot my bull, but it was like they were just so enamored with the bugle fest and the hot cows in the area that they really didn't care what was going on. And this, at least those last few days, was not like that at all. It was they were definitely paying attention to what was going on around them.
yeah, I think that public land pressure, especially with all the different
Yeah.
hunters that had never been in there before, I think we were getting into some spots that everybody else had probably tracked through and checked out at one point or another. But I mean, I that pretty much wrapped up the trip for us. Honestly, like I don't know that we ever heard another
We
real
didn't really get
bull.
back into him again. I felt like we were day 5. I felt like we were closer than maybe we thought we were. Um, Day 4, the end of day 4, we basically went back to camp, and we had a cow in the meadow barking at us at night, which kind of woke us up in our sleep. She was right outside of our tent, which I think every time we had these encounters, we weren't hearing the elk bugle. We weren't, but it was like we were, outside of our camp having a cow elk bark at us. Um, and you could hear her walking around that meadow. It was like we knew the elk were in the area. They just were not, they just didn't seem like they were rutting like they should have been. So no bugles at night, just that cow. Um, Day 5, we decided, we hunted in the morning again. Um, didn't I mean no bugling again. So like second morning in a row, not hearing any bugles in areas that we had always heard bugles in. It was the hottest day. It was getting hotter and hotter. There were clear skies. Just not good hunting conditions. We decided to pack back down to the bottom. I know Hunter, you were really like the driving force on this, and we had seen so many elk down low, and we are so close on the hike in, then it was pretty far ways down there. The thought was, well, maybe these bulls are just down low. Like
Yeah,
maybe just they've pushed down low, and we need to get back down there where we'd seen them again. And it was kind of we knew it was hard to hunt down there, but it was also, at least if we were going to hear bulls down there, we would at least be able to get after them instead of this just sit on a meadow, cow call, and hope something shows up right at dark. Because that's just really not, that really hasn't been our style of hunting historically. That's just not what we did. We've always chased bugles and just, got in the middle of them and got a shot off. So um, kind of sitting in the same spot all day and calling. Just that wasn't something I was super comfortable with. I'm not the best. I'm not the best elk caller. I don't think any of us are probably super confident in our skills when it comes into calling elk. So that was just something that wasn't playing to our strengths. I think we can move around the mountain probably better than most, even if we think we're not. I think we know that mountain so well that we have just been able to hear bulls, know where they're going, get in front of them, and cut them off.
And
And
get
we were
lucky.
just not able to do that when they weren't making any noise. So
Yeah.
we packed down, set up camp. Actually, we didn't set up camp. We decided it was so warm. We were down lower. We were 1,000 feet lower than we were before. We were kind of in that desert country that we were just going to sleep on our mats on a tarp um, under the stars. But before that happened, Hunter and Nico, they went, it was about 500 yards. We had to walk to the nearest water source. They had walked to get water. I, again, was just resting. It was getting, I don't know, it was 3, 4 p.m. I was pretty much taking a nap. Um, Hunter and Nico had been gone for a while. I get a phone call from Nico, phone service for the win again. And he's like, hey, we checked out this pond that was on Onyx, and we've always seen it, but we've never really checked it out. And they were like, it's tore up in here. And it was in that same area that we had seen that big 6-pointer on day one. And they were like, hey, it's torn up in here. We're going to sit this. We don't want to walk 500 yards back to camp, then 500 yards back. Why don't you just grab my bow, give me a puffy jacket, and meet us over here? So it was like, great. That sounds great. We had a plan for that evening. It was going to really be the last evening hunt. And after seeing that bull in there, I'd seen bulls in that area before. It was like, hey, we might be onto something here. So got Nico's bow, got the puffy, and as I'm like standing up to walk over to him, I hear a bull bugle. This is the first bull we've heard bugle in 2 days now, 2.5 days, bugle right under our camp. I'm hoping that Hunter and Nico heard it. I actually sat there for a while waiting for a phone call or a text saying, hey, no, we're coming back your way. The bull bugled one more time right under our camp. And again, this is like bottom of the canyon. You can't actually get to him. And it kind of sounded like he was directly under camp. But if we know anything about these bulls in the area, they love to follow the creek lines. And the creek was running up right where Nico and Hunter were. So even though it wasn't directly below us, they were 500 yards away. Met up with them and came up with a game plan that, hey, this bull's probably going to follow this creek. Hunter ended up sitting up on it would be the east side of the creek on the pond. Me and Nico found a meadow area that we filmed the bull in, or pretty close to where we had filmed the bull in on day one. And it was tore up with sign. It was probably the best sign that we had seen in there on the entire trip. I mean, it looked like a parade had went through there. So we knew we had a bull under us. We knew we were in an area that they had traveled that week. We knew we were on the creek that they were coming up and down all the time. So it was either this bull was going to come up through us or this bull was going to have to walk over the top of our tent, which we didn't think he was going to do. So sat there, it got closer and closer to dark. Me and Nico actually heard some cow calls. Or I say calls, but we heard cow elk down below us in the canyon. The wind, unfortunately, this was the same bull on night one that was using the thermals, using the wind. Right when it got about prime time, the thermals changed. The thermals started dropping off this canyon. We knew we weren't in a great spot, that the thermals were going right down. We were just hoping that maybe the bull came up. It's pretty much a cliff, hoping that our wind was blowing over the canyon and not down into it. But we did hear right before it got dark, we heard some rocks. Me, Hunter, Nico, we all heard some rocks, which sounded like probably an elk busting out of that area. And that was pretty much it. We didn't lay eyes on an elk that night. We felt like we were in a really good spot. When I was standing behind Nico, I felt really, really confident that something was going to come up through that meadow, just because of all the tracks. The bull below was bugling. It just seemed like, hey, this is the same path that bull followed a few days prior. We know he's down there again. This might happen. And it just did not.
Yeah, it was kind of a tough way to end things. I mean, at that point, the hunting had gotten so tough that we knew we were in for a challenge. And another aspect that kind of played into it was we were almost throwing a Hail Mary. We knew that we were running out of time, and it was just making it more and more difficult as the minutes passed, because
Yeah.
if we kill one, we almost have to rush to get out of there on the time that we'd planned to get out of there. So yeah, it was kind
Yeah,
of,
because I mean, this was.
yeah,
I
it
was about
was,
to say this was Friday. This was what? No, this would have been Thursday evening. We have an 18-hour drive home, and just the bulls we had killed in the past. We'd never killed one in the afternoon. So if we killed a bull Wednesday morning, Wednesday night, if we're lucky, we get the bull back to camp, and then the next day, you got to make 2 trips in and back. So you're talking about a full day, maybe a day and a half.
yeah,
So you shoot one Thursday night, you're probably not getting to that bull, getting him back to camp till Friday morning. And without 2 trucks and being able to come from the top, you might not get that bull out of there till Saturday afternoon, which means you're getting home Sunday night. And I know I had to work Monday. I'm sure you guys had to work Monday. It was one of those, like, if we get
crunch.
one now, we're pushing it. But still, I mean, you're out there. It's a Hail Mary. We knew the thermals were bad. We knew the bull was below us. Thermals are going down, but that was the only bull that we knew was there. You couldn't get below them. It was just kind of like cross your fingers and
Yeah,
hope. We've had bad luck all week. Hope that we get a strike of good luck right here at the end, and it just didn't turn out that way. So went back to camp. That was the first time. That was the first time I'd ever slept outside of a tent, kind of down in those junipers. We had a clear view of the sky, so that was pretty nice. I mean, it was probably the warmest night for sure. Just laying on a tarp, laying on a sleeping mat. I mean, that was basically it. So, and that was the best night of sleep I had the
yeah,
whole trip. Honestly, I don't know if it was. I don't know what it was, but um, I don't know. You can't do that very often late September in Colorado. You're usually the temperature, at elevation is going to be too cold, or,
yeah,
I think that was just, I did enjoy at least ending it in that way. It felt like, I don't know, felt like we were really on the mountain at that point. So, woke up the next morning. I know we were still holding on to hope even the day we were packing out, because we had run into elk on the way in. We were still running into, we were on our last grasp of hope. We
hey,
were running on fumes.
I was
I
still
was
fired
ready.
up. I was ready to go.
Hunter was. I was ready to get off the mountain. It's Friday morning. Even if we shoot one, like, what are we talking about? Um, but my hope was that we're going to find one down by that meadow we ran into the first day, and every step we take is closer to the truck. So if we shoot one this close to the truck, probably get him out of here quicker than we've ever got one out before. But that last morning, we didn't hear any real bugles. We did have a guy bugling above us.
He got me.
Hunter went and stalked him. Hunter was stalking him. He was stalking us. He was a local, so he lived out there close. He was hunting on his own, so we got to talk to him a little bit. I think we exchanged information too, just because he seems like he hunts solo out there, and we're usually hunting with 3. And um,
Yeah,
we could always use a helping hand getting one out. And him being familiar with the area, he seemed open, at least when we talked to him, to working with us in the future. But
oh wait,
um,
he's calling me right now.
we'll see.
Let me answer. Let me put him
Yeah,
on here. No, I don't think we're
I
ever
think
gonna
we
hear
should have
from
told
him.
you. I don't think residents think real fondly of non-residents. I think I need to. I still got my old Colorado driver's license. I think when we run into people out there and they're residents, we just need to tell them that we're all residents. And if they ask, I'll be like, no, I'll give them my old address, and they might be a little nicer to us and more helpful. Because living out there, I do feel like the residents were much more open. Like, it was almost like a brotherhood. Like, hey, we're all in this together. We live here. Like, but when you ran into a non-resident, it was like, nah, we're not.
Yeah,
Like, we're not going to be mean there. Everyone was super nice to us. Everyone was courteous. No one at all ran us off the mountain. But I don't think anybody who lives out there is going to tell you exactly where to go either, or bring a horse in and pack you off the mountain. So, but last day didn't hear any real bugles. The trail was finally hard, so we were able to get down. We were able to get down off the mountain probably quicker than we ever have. But that being said, truly the only two times we were on down in that canyon, we've packed a bull out the last day. So this was the quickest way out that we've had in a long time, which I didn't necessarily enjoy. I was really hoping that we were going to get a bull on this trip, and honestly, I was really expecting that we would. So, but I do think we learned. I think we learned a lot of lessons this year. I think every year we go, we get a little smarter. I think this was by far the 3 years we've been in that like spot. I know we've been there four, but this was kind of the last 3 years have been the years that we've hunted like that area that we're really comfortable with. I think we've learned something on every trip. I feel like the first year when me and Evan got a bull, it was completely luck. Like I feel like we were just running around in there. We had no idea what we were doing, and we just got completely lucky. Last year, I feel like we at least had a game plan. Luck definitely played a role, but I think last year the bulls were just they were rutting so hard that like didn't take a whole lot of skill to like get within range. You literally just kind of heard them bugling, got the wind right, and walked into the middle of them. I feel like this year, like technically speaking, was the most like technical hunting we've had to do, where it's the bulls aren't making noise. We have to actually know where they want to be, which I felt like we did. I felt like we were in areas that we've seen them before. You know, we were on their tracks. Like we knew where meadows were that they wanted to be in. We knew where they were bedded, which is something that 3 4 years ago I couldn't imagine knowing just, oh hey, there's bulls up there, and like confidently knowing that a bull was bedded in like a very tight area. And I think this year, like sitting on that meadow, we knew bulls were bedded up there, and then to call and actually have one get out of its bed and check on us without hearing it, I think gave me more confidence as an elk hunter, and especially that area. Having called in those two bulls, going to where we camped, knowing, hey, we've run into bulls down in these meadows before, and then setting up camp and then spotting bulls in the oak brush from that camp like we had in the past in the same areas. I think we had to work much harder this year for opportunities, which is why even though we didn't get a bull, I feel like we were 100% more successful than we probably even should have been, given it was 85 degrees every day. The bulls weren't bugling, and we were still able to get, multiple bulls within bow range on a realistically, we hunted 5 days, and we weren't even able to really even get to the areas we wanted to get to until, day two. So, um, I think I think we'll look back at this year as a really tough year. I think if we were to go back and we get better conditions, I think we're gonna have better results. I wouldn't change anything about the process, I guess. Like I think our process was good. I just don't think it worked this year. But I
Yeah,
wouldn't change the process.
I think for me personally, like
Mm.
there's a couple major things that I think we both learned in two instances that in my mind looking back, if we probably set up correctly, I think we get a shot. Like for whatever reason it seemed like those bulls had like a 40-yard buffer that they weren't gonna come any closer than 40 yards if they're coming to a cow call. It's like they get within that distance, and if they don't see the cow out in front of them, they're not going to come any further. And I honestly think they've been hunted hard enough that they've been educated. And late September, and I think that was solely the purpose. Those two bulls that we came pretty close to, I think that's why they busted. And for us going forward, I think that being a little more strategic, maybe before we start calling or even after we start calling, like you mentioned, moving around, making some noise behind the shooter, and spreading out, especially if you have three guys. I mean, in a little bit of our defense, we are trying to film. So whenever you have the cameraman doing the calling and he gets 40 yards away from you, the stuff's thick enough you can't get it on film. So yeah, if I had to do it again on those two setups, I think we move the caller 40 yards back, or we move the shooters 40 yards ahead. And I feel like that's the magic number. Maybe it's not exactly 40, but in both cases that was spot on.
And I think it has a lot to do with like line of sight. I think in both of those cases, we set up 40 yards to like
Yeah.
the barriers that we could see. So like we set up 40 yards to like the furthest point we could realistically like see. So like 40 yards to the top of the hill, they're gonna come down. Or we set up 40 yards to that like line of brush. And I think those bulls are using those same line of sights. Like they know exactly where they're hearing that call. So they're gonna come. It seemed to me like not like if we were set it up in a meadow or an area that we could see out to 60 yards, I don't think those bulls would have came to 40. I think they would have got to our
Right.
like 60-yard line
Right.
of sight and then they would have looked in. So
Yeah.
um I think like you said, like they're gonna come to where they can stay as far away as they can, but have a line of sight to, hey, I should be able to see. If they're standing right there, I'll see it. And they get to that point, and honestly, I mean, they hung around for long enough to manufacture a shot. It was just we just weren't in a good position. So like I totally agree. I think you gotta have someone further back calling. With three, I guess you could do one caller, one cameraman, one shooter. That's an option. But I mean, if you got three guys, I would rather have two guys with the bow spread out and have one guy dropped back. So maybe that's something, that we just, maybe we have to work on point of view camera. I don't know how we would do it, but
Yeah.
I 100% agree that like it works better, at least in those conditions, if you can just get further back. I never imagined we would be in that position where we're calling in silent bulls. I really thought it
Yeah.
would be bulls are bugling. Let's get in the middle of them and like
Yeah. I
we'll hear
mean,
them. Let's just get on them. And
I,
that's just not how the hunting was this
it
year.
also kind of gave me confidence going forward that now we can work on some of our calling and maybe even some bugling in the future. But that was the first two times that we've ever had a bull come in to a call, so it's kind of refreshing to know that it's possible. But it's also disappointing to know that we couldn't get it done. But I guess another key takeaway that I'm gonna remember next time that we have a little bit of moisture in the air, or it's rained, or the ground's a little bit wet going in, is just pay attention to the terrain around you as far as tracks go. I know that we cut tracks, I don't know how many times in the trail, like two or three times, of where everybody walks, like in the horse trail. And one of those bulls was that 6x6. His tracks cut right across the trail, went right down the finger where we spotted him at that night. I mean, we had seen those tracks in the trail when we went to get water. And I remember mentioning to those guys, I'm like, hey, look at these tracks. There's a bull over here. And then we never really thought about it much further than that, when in reality, we should have known that those tracks were probably fresh as can be, assuming that we'd walked in that day when it had rained. And then, later on, it kind of bites us in the butt that he's on that same finger where we saw the track. So it's like, maybe we could have sat up on him a little bit better. I mean, we were just sitting at camp, so we really didn't have anything going. We could have possibly went
Yeah.
down, but the wind at the end of the day was still going to hurt us in that situation. But
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you got to trust. I think you got to trust your hunting instincts, because I think I do the same thing. I see tracks and I'm like, well, who knows where those are from? Or you see fresh sign, but you're like, okay, well, there's sign, but I don't see any elk.
yeah,
But I think that's a good, and I think we did really good doing that. Like I said, I think we
we got better.
kind of knew where we felt like they were at, and we got set up on them. But end of the day, didn't work out.
What about you,
I still
Nico?
had fun.
You feel like any major takeaways, things that you're going to use going forward that you learned on this hunt, or things that you would do differently, maybe?
Just gonna pack in a bow press.
Yeah, maybe that. Maybe actually bring the backup bow next time. Jordan kind of talked me out of it,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Let's say can't really have expectations because you don't really know what's going to happen out there.
Yeah.
I think that's good. What was your favorite part of the hunt, Hunter?
For me, I mean, it's the bull. I think coming into the cow calls at the wallow, it just for me it was personally as good as being able to shoot one. I mean, it's what I'd been imagining for years, and I mean, it sounds funny because I didn't even get a shot at it, but I mean, I've played that scenario back in my head so many times, and just to be able to lay eyes on one and get that close to him, and for me, it's just like we're doing it the hardest way possible, and I don't know, we've always liked a challenge, so it's like a team event out there. I mean, whenever we get into them, we're not only are we butting heads with each other at times, but there's also times where we're celebrating each other. So like last year when you killed your bull, me and Nico were literally, I don't even know, we might have been hugging. We might have jumped up in each other's arms and high fived and fist pumped whenever you shot a bull, half a mile away. So um, there's some like team aspect to it that I think it builds, lifelong memories and friendships, and it also tests us at the same time. So I don't
I
know.
would agree.
What about
What
you?
was your favorite part, Nico?
Well, I thought one of the coolest parts of the trip, probably that you didn't even bring up, I think it was on day one. I guess it was an action packed day, but around noon, we were walking up that trail and we heard about 300 bugles going for about 45 minutes straight. I thought that was pretty
You
neat.
talking about the
And
like
then,
the 11 a.m. bugle frenzy that just kept going
yeah,
nuts in the clouds?
Yeah,
for about an
yeah,
hour.
we had a midday. We had some fog roll in that day, and it was like midday. The fog was and clouds were like eye level with us, and yeah, those bulls, whatever it did to them, they were ripping
Yeah, I
all morning.
I think
And
we
it was
heard.
like that was day one, and it was one of those where it was like, all right, this is gonna be like if they keep this up and they're bugling at 11 a.m. just nonstop, like we're gonna be able to get right on one. And that was pretty much it. That was they did that day, and then
I
that
think
was it.
I think they bugled like I bet we heard 50 to 100 bugles that first day, and then it tapered off so fast it wasn't even funny. It just fell straight down to zero bugles on the last 3 days basically.
Yeah.
Then my second favorite part of the trip was Hunter's meal that he made
Mm,
on day 5, I think. The
Thanksgiving
death
dinner.
meal.
the death
Yeah, it
meal.
was awesome.
It was pretty good. I had to finish it, or I had to split it between the three of us because I couldn't finish it all. I put half a pack of stuffing, half a pack of mashed potatoes, jalapeno tuna, chicken salad, chicken from Starkist, bone broth. Was that it? I think that's it.
I think so.
I've got a picture of it if anybody needs to have the death meal. But you want to save that for whenever you're out of the hunt. Like you don't want to be hunting very hard after that because it's gonna smack you around pretty good. I mean, I was ready to cash it in at that point. But Jordan, what was your favorite part?
I don't know. I guess I mean obviously the encounter at the wallow was pretty awesome. I think the most memorable thing that'll stick with me, like truthfully, like Nico putting that bow together. I know that at the moment that was not fun for me to worry, but I think that is something that like when I look back at this trip and people are like, "What do you remember from that hunt?" I'm gonna be like, "Oh yeah, Nico broke his bow and used zip ties and paracord and built a bow press and put his bow together." So that was up there for me. Having the phone scope, honestly, like that was one thing that I've always just like never got, even though it's like super easy to use. Have binoculars. Like I've just never used a phone scope. And I think that's one thing I'll probably never go without now. Because being able to look back at those bulls, because I feel like every year I've been in there, um, even like on antelope trips, like you look at antelope and like filming, like you're out there and then like you see something, you're like, oh, that's cool. And then it's like, well, hope you remember it. I think the phone scope, having those phone scope videos of that 6 point bull, because if I was just going off memory, like I would change my mind 100 times whether that was a big bull, whether it wasn't a big bull. Just in the moment was I excited, but now being able to look back and be like, oh no, that was a big 6 point bull, and we got video of it. We can look at it. Um, so yeah, um, both of those I think are things I'll take away from it. My favorite
I
parts.
think another point that me and Nico forgot to touch on is that day we were trying to get the trash burnt, and we saw the Boone and Crockett chipmunk. I mean, this thing was a tank. He looked like a gray squirrel. George's still convinced it was
Yeah.
some sort of squirrel, but he had the markings down his back and everything. And me and Nico, we didn't say a word when it was happening. We just both looked over and caught him running away. He's probably stealing some of that peanut butter. But we just looked at each other, and I'm like, was that what I thought it was? And he's like, yeah, I think it was. And we're like,
I
yeah.
think he was carrying about 6 acorns in his mouth.
Yeah, he was a beast. And then I guess the last memorable thing that I probably want to forget at some point is just the experience coming in. And we thought we knew, me and Jordan thought we knew the parking lot pretty well. And, we went on past it. And I think, Nico, you said that it's still up here. I think you were looking at it on your
Yeah,
Yeah.
phone.
Nico told us. We were both convinced. We should have listened to Nico, but
Yeah.
basically there's a parking lot you're supposed to use. It's gravel. We're on that parking lot once a year. So excuse us for not remembering exactly what it looked like, but we're pulling
Never
up
been
to
at
it.
night either.
Never been at night. We're pulling up,
3 a.m.
and I mean you're on a road where there's not much there, and we pull up and there's a parking lot. And I mean what we pulled into,
Soup.
like, it was the same size though. It's not like it was bigger, it was small. Like there was nothing
Yeah.
about that spot that would make you think this isn't the parking lot. We pulled up into this. I mean, there was a pull in for it. There are horse trailers, which like we know there's outfitters in the area. So we're like, oh, this is it. As soon as we get off the road, we just sink into the mud. I mean, the tires are sunk. Hunter is like, we're stuck in the mud, still convinced we're in the right spot. We put it in 4 low. We park up by these trailers. We get out. We ruin our Crocs to the point that I didn't even take my Crocs with me. I was stepping on cactus the whole trip. But we're looking for the trailhead. And I'm like, boys, there was a sign here. Like, there's a sign at the trailhead. You go in. We've seen it. We've walked down it. And I was convinced that someone had come in and ripped the sign down for the trailhead. So we're walking around. We get our Onyx out, and it's like, no, you're off by about 200 yards. And I'm like, no,
It was showing
no way. Like
us,
our Onyx isn't working.
our Onyx was showing us behind the parking lot. And I'm like,
Yeah, we're like,
we're
there's
not
no
behind
way.
the parking lot. We just parked in it. Well,
Yeah,
in reality, we were in the wrong parking lot, and we actually were behind the real parking lot because me and Nico ended
I
up
think we
just.
were on private.
No, I looked it up. It was still whatever,
Was
whoever
still
owns it out
public.
there. Yeah.
We
But
were in just a big mud hole.
yeah, me and Nico ended up busting out on the road and just started walking towards the creek that runs through there. And we were like, you know what? We came out last year up there, so let's just walk that way. And we went down the road a couple hundred yards. And we look at each other and we're like, oh my gosh, there's like a paved, I think it was oil and chip parking lot
Beautiful.
full of
Yeah,
vehicles.
beautiful,
And we're like, oh
beautiful
my,
gravel
Perfect.
parking lot.
just great, just tremendous. But
So yeah, we had to move the truck at 3 a.m. Someone left a note on our truck and was like, "You're parked in trailer parking," and it's like a.
that's the
But
yeah,
yeah, that
could
was.
have been worse.
I was so asleep. I remember you guys. I was like, I wasn't even. I don't even remember most of that. I was so out of it, walking around in my Crocs in the mud. That like that was an afterthought once we got going down that trail.
Yeah. So
But
that, I mean, hopefully that's not the only thing we remember about that trip for years to come, but it's
no,
definitely a memory.
we'll be back.
So when you gonna have this video wrapped up, Jordan? Still got to get.
We're
the footage.
working on it. Well, for one, I don't have the footage.
I know, that's what I was waiting on you to ask for it.
Like, I don't have the footage. I have my footage, which I mean, I could work with it. But
think
no,
I'll-
we didn't. I mean, we got back to my house at what,
Bad time.
2 a.m.,
Hurricane.
3 a.m.
Yeah.
So we did not. We didn't get the footage, but we'll get it all thrown together. I think we had enough. I mean, our footage from this hunt's better than hunts where we actually killed bulls. So we got footage of bulls. We got footage of bulls at, within bow range. We got mag view footage of bulls. We got some good stuff on there. We'll share the story and we'll get it put up. In the meantime, if you want to check out, if you have any questions around meal prep, we got what our meals we took out there, how we pack light, and how we keep our calories up in the backcountry. We got pack dump videos. I know Hunter's got a pack dump video. Nico's got a pack dump video. I think we all pack our packs a little differently, so you can check out how we each do that. We got videos on how to draw tags in Colorado. We got videos on over-the-counter tags and what that's going to mean for Colorado. We got all kinds of stuff on the page. So if you haven't checked out our page, it's Recruit Creative on YouTube. We got a lot of good videos up there. If you want to check out some of our past hunts, we got deer hunts, we got antelope hunts, we got whitetail hunts in the Midwest. So yeah, check it out if you haven't. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check us out.
Comment mean things. We love reading the mean comments. It gets us going. Gets the blood boiling a little bit.
If you're watching, if you are watching this on the YouTube, you can get those. Hunter's got a nice hat on over there. And I'm sure he would make you one and send you one out. It's got the elk with the American flag on there. I got the post rut clarity hat. So yeah, check us out. Nico, he's repping the, what is that, Nico? Is that
G Loomis?
6 Cents. I'm repping another brand on the pod tonight.
Nico's ripping lips, so he's wearing his fishing hat. So yep, check us out. We're gonna be in Arizona here in about 3 weeks on a deer hunt. So we might do a pod where we
got to do a whitetail.
Break that hunt down when we get back.
Whitetail
we'll
pod.
Do a whitetail one. Whitetail are out. They're scratching the trees.
Guys, we've got an issue.
So
we've got an issue here.
What's the issue?
Record?
I wasn't recording the whole time.
Oh, I see it. It says it on my screen.
No, just kidding. I was trying to be more like you, Jordan.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up until next time. So next year we're headed to Alaska. So you'll be able to check us out. We're going to shoot a caribou. Me and Nico are going. We're going to drag Hunter with us.
It's a big negative.
No more of this elk hunting stuff. We're going to go out there and we're going to shoot 3 caribou.
We're going to build some elk points.
Yeah.
Build some elk points. We're going to wait till we don't have to hunt these over-the-counter units. And
we're going to leave.
Me and Nico, we're going to do some caribou hunting. We're going to shoot 1 first day, 2 first day. If Hunter goes, shoot 3 first day.
We're going to leave elk to find elk.
Yeah,
find caribou.
Halibut fishing and yeah. So stay tuned for that.
Maybe some salmon.
Stay tuned for that. Some salmon, that'd be great.
All right.
So you should comment what you think we should do on our next hunt.
I honestly don't think anybody's listening at this point. Right. Over and out.
That's all right. See ya.
See ya.